are you?
Good.
When we're done, can you give me a call when you're
Yes.
driving home?
Yep.
I need to follow up with you on a different matter.
Sure.
Thanks.
Yeah, good. Okay. All right. Calling to order the Zoning Board of Appeals. If you can please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. First things first, I would like to please observe a moment of silence for former chairman of the zoning board, Joseph Pacheco, who passed away last week. Thank you. All right. Next thing is to confirm the next meeting date, which is September 22nd, 2026.
Works for me.
Marguerite, if you are needed, are you around that time?
I am around that day, and
Just in case anything pops up.
if you need me,
Okay.
I'm not gonna
Right.
look for Carrie to confirm that if I'm needed. or
Right.
not.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Next thing to review, discuss, and act on the House Bill 5555, Act making appropriations for the fiscal year 2027, quote unquote, the new law. Marguerite, have you had a chance to look at the law yet?
I have, and I've had a chance to review all of the changes. There's some that really don't necessarily impact the board, but there's a couple that are pretty different for you. I think you all were aware of this last meeting, and I do want to commend you for the discussion that you had with regard to the variance application the last meeting, because I think that you actually did a very nice job trying to reflect the changes in the law in your discussion and comments, and it was very useful when I put together the written decision.
Good. Okay.
So I thought that, I know you have questions about how are we going to do this and what does this mean, and I think a lot of those questions are questions that zoning boards across the state are going to have.
Yep.
But I think that you did what I would have recommended
Okay.
in terms of approaching the changes. So I can summarize them a little bit for you.
Sure.
I can tell you how I think this impacts the board's operations, and also some of the changes or areas where I think the zoning bylaw may be seeing some changes.
If you want to summarize it, that'd be fine. Sure.
Sure. Yeah. So the law was included as part of the governor's approval of the state budget, and they made some changes to certain laws as part of the approval of the state budget. They actually indicated that the reason that they were making these changes into some of these laws, they said that they felt that deferred operation of the act would defeat its purpose, which was to immediately make appropriations for the fiscal year beginning July 1st of 2026, and to make certain changes in the law, each of which is immediately necessary or appropriate to effectuate said appropriations, or, and this is where I think the 40A revisions come into play, or for other important public purposes. So they felt that these revisions were necessary for important public purposes. As you may recall, the governor has done a lot of work around trying to increase the availability and options for construction of affordable housing and additional housing to address the lack of housing need that exists in the Commonwealth. So I see these revisions as attempting to try to take away or eliminate certain types of restrictions that existed within 40A that prohibited better use of land or use of land for residential purposes, although some of the revisions do apply beyond residential purposes. Officially, it's the Chapter 137 of the Acts of 2006, which was signed by the governor on July 9th, 2026, and it says that unless it indicates otherwise, it took effect July 1st of 2026. So all these changes are now in place, and there's going to certainly be more communication about them as we go forward. But right now, there were changes primarily made to do, 3 things. One of the things was to allow for notification of public notification of meetings or changes to the zoning bylaw to happen not just by mail, but also electronically. So for practical purposes for Carrie, this means that any abutters notices or any notices of public hearings, you can send now electronically, Carrie, to any of the abutting boards, town boards. You don't need to mail it out.
That one's like, that one I was like, well, it took so long for them to do that one. I mean, that one, you know what I mean? Yeah.
And if somehow a landowner provides the town with their email address, rather than their mailing address, abutters notices don't have to go out by certified mail, they could go out by email to that landowner too. So
Wow.
if the abutters office, assessor's office starts collecting email contacts for property owners, then you can use that to send out abutters notices.
Right. So that's the biggest thing was how else are we? Like, great, so you can send out through email. How do I get their email? That's not public information. So
The question.
They'd have to provide it to the assessor's office. It'd have to be in a record that the town maintains. If they don't, you're gonna have no choice but to continue to send it by certified mail, because that's a record that you have based
Right.
on their deed, so.
okay, John.
But there are people sometimes, Carrie, you might occasionally get someone who's asking for information to be provided about a case.
Yeah.
Especially your 40Bs, and in that situation, if you want to, collect their email address, you can send it to them by email, you don't need to mail out public notice.
Go ahead, John.
Is there when I was wondering about that though, is there a timeline, like the email has to be the email address has to be received within 6 months, 3 months, 1 year, because we can get
There's
it.
no timeline in the law. I think it remains to be seen how this actually gets implemented. I think that for practical purposes, you're going to start seeing it being state agencies or communities, municipal entities initially, and then I do think that eventually our world, as we're moving into more electronic, contacts and communications, our world is going to start having email addresses used or some type of electronic contact means happening, and the law will allow that to be a way that you can provide that notice to the person.
Right.
And I'm not. My only concern is that if we have someone who gave us an email address 18 months ago,
I've seen the same
and
thing.
then they've changed it since
That's what I
for
was thinking
whatever
too.
reason.
So, but the point is that if they provide that email address to the town as a way to contact them,
They should have.
Then-
It's on them to give us.
then the burden has been met by the petitioner or town showing that they sent it to that email address.
Right. Okay.
So it remains, if the person wants to use email as a way to be contacted, then that person, the burden is on the person who wants to use email to keep it up to date and let anyone know if that email address changes.
Right.
Okay.
I don't think you're going to find a lot of individual landowners receiving notices this way. I think you're primarily going to see that for your town boards, other town community boards.
Which have their own email addresses anyway, right? So.
If there's an attorney who wants something, they may be able to give it in an individual case, Carrie, but you probably got that anyways.
Right. Yeah.
So that's one area, that's one sort of minor change, but it is a practice area that impacts the board slightly. And then there's 2 main laws that they changed. One has to do with Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 6, which has to do with pre-existing non-conforming structures and uses. And then the other one is Mass General Laws, Chapter 48, Section 10, which is your variance law. So the 48, Section 6 changes are interesting, and for the zoning bylaws that you have, they really would be impacting section 2400. So there's a couple of different revisions that have been made. One is that so when there's a change to the zoning bylaw, it is now the case that that change will not apply to building permits, special permits, and then they added or other entitlements applied for under Chapter 40A, which I guess could be maybe an appeal of a building inspector's decision, for
Oh,
instance, you can
okay.
apply to that for that. You might apply for a zoning determination, conclusion to be, I mean, there's a couple of different, they're minor, but for the zoning board's purposes, I could see that maybe if they're applying for an appeal of the building inspector's determination, and you were to uphold or not uphold the building inspector, overturn that person, then that new outcome would be covered here. If, for instance, let's say the building inspector issued a cease and desist because somebody was using a property improperly, and you said, no, our zoning bylaw allows that use. It's not an improper use. And then the zoning bylaw were to change and make it clear that that use is now prohibited on that type of land. That if this situation had occurred, rather than being I don't remember what the old statute, I'd have to check on that, the old time frame was, but currently, if this situation occurred 24 months prior,
Okay.
including any tolling time, so they toll at any period of time, that 24 months doesn't start to run until all permits needed to effectuate construction have been received. So if you have some sort of prior application, and now there's been changes to the zoning bylaw, that change to the zoning bylaw isn't going to impact this prior application, provided that prior application occurred less than 24 months after all permits that they need to effectuate construction have
So
been received.
basically, you're grandfathered in for 24 months. That's your.
Plus the time that
Okay.
you need to get all of your permitting. Yes.
Okay.
So that's one change. Another change is that now, as of right, if it's a pre-existing non-conforming structure of any kind, residential or non-residential, or if it's a pre-existing non-conforming residential use, and that's pre-existing and non-conforming because of lot size, shape, frontage, lot coverage, or the floor area ratio. And whatever changes they're trying to make will now comply with the dimensional setback height and stories requirements of the zoning bylaw. That's allowed to occur as of right. You don't need that special permit from the zoning board anymore.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's
So that's gonna
That's
have
a-
an
that's a really
impact
big one.
on, the language in 2420, the language in 2430, and some of the language in 2450. So that's gonna likely, the planning board is likely that we're gonna be getting some advice to make some revisions to those areas. And then the first part that I had talked about, the part about the 24-month tolling, will impact the language in 2410. Okay? And then the last piece, major change under 48 section 6, actually there's two more, sorry, is that a property that has been abandoned can now be abandoned for up to 4 years before it's deemed to have lost its pre-existing non-conforming status.
Jesus.
Okay, so it used to be 2 years, now it could be up to 4 years.
But does it have to be up to 4 years?
Well,
Could-
you can't, that property remains pre-existing and non-conforming if it's been abandoned for less than 4 years.
Wow.
So you can't
In essence,
impose the
we can't-
current zoning requirements on it if it's been less than 4 years since
Yeah,
it was
so in
abandoned.
essence, we
We don't
can't
have it
touch
too
it.
often, though. Really, we have before, though, but not too
You
often.
did have one that would be, that probably would now have been protected under this,
Yeah,
right?
I bet.
It was close,
That's what
if
I'm,
I remember correctly.
Yep.
And then the last thing that was changed under 48 section 6 is that, it used to be that only, residential, single family and two family, lots that were pre-existing non-conforming but contained a certain minimum threshold of frontage and area, were protected and still viable lots. they've expanded that protection to any lot. It doesn't have to just be for residential, single and two-family uses. So it could be for commercial use.
Commercial,
It could
yeah.
be for multifamily use. It could be more than a two-family use. It could be for, you know, a multiple family use, apartments, as long as that lot has that minimum threshold, which is 7,500 square feet, and I forget what I think it's 75 feet of frontage. It is considered usable, and it is considered a viable lot if that lot was in existence prior to the adoption of zoning in the town.
Wow.
Okay,
I mean, I get.
so this doesn't necessarily impact your operations regularly. It will change, you know, language in the zoning bylaw more than anything, and it will probably be something that the building department is going to come across more often than the zoning board will, I think. Because you'll see building permits being active applications for building permits for these types of lots, and they won't require zoning board relief.
I was just gonna
Right.
say, yeah.
Right.
You know, it's not really going to change too much, other than the abandonment of 4 years. You know, you'll have to know that it's been less than 4 years rather than less than 2 years.
Right.
It's going to take things off your plate that you would have otherwise been seeing.
Yeah, but it's gonna change the look of the town pretty fast.
Yeah, and
Yes.
like I said, this is all tied to the governor's the current administration's goal of trying to increase the availability of housing by making housing easier to build and having less permitting hoops to jump through.
It sounds like, you know, basically, I mean, in Dayton, there are a lot of very small little pieces of land that otherwise couldn't have been used, really. And now all of a sudden, I could see, you know, it's a plethora for them. Designers,
Well,
architects.
they have to be pre-existing before any zoning in Dayton happened.
Yep.
So the first zoning, and I don't actually have it in here, when was the first zoning bylaw in Dayton, but if I
69?
remember, it's been a while, but I wanna say it was in the 50s.
I thought it was 69, but it could have been 50s.
Okay,
Yeah.
it's been a while since I've looked at your old zoning bylaws, but,
Yeah.
so it would have to pre-exist that, and then it would have to have the minimum, square footage and frontage in
Right.
order to
So-
be considered viable.
So those pieces are still there, at least.
Yeah, and they've always been there and available for use for single and two family dwellings. I think the more interesting piece will be that you could put a larger multifamily dwelling on
On
it
a smaller
or
piece,
commercial
yeah.
use.
That's what I mean.
Which is one of those things where, like, that's how developers claim to get their money. It's like, oh, no, I'll put a 2-family, I'll put a 3-family. It's like, I mean, now, it's not like every parcel they'll be able to, but it's giving them more options to be able to do that.
Mhm.
And if you
Yeah.
remember, it was just like a year and a half or 2 years ago, we had a situation where, you know, the developer wanted to build a two unit house.
Right. Yep.
Yeah.
You know, and theoretically now they can make that a 3 unit.
Right.
Or
Well,
even
if
4.
it's if that lot pre-existed
Which it did.
and had a minimum size to it.
Yep.
I mean, 75 feet of frontage is not small.
No.
No, I know.
You guys have a lot of lots that have a lot less than that.
Right.
Wow. Well,
Yeah. So, like I said, I don't think it's really gonna impact your operations. I think what will happen is it will keep you from having as many cases. Sorry, I was just trying to double check on this frontage amount if I can. Just give me 1 minute. I'll pull it up. So, okay, I had the numbers wrong. It's 5,000 square feet of frontage, 5,000 square feet of area and 50 feet of frontage.
Okay.
that's really tight. That's very tight.
Yeah, and it has to have been in existence, prior to January 1st, 1976. or 5
1970.
years from the effective date of zoning. But for you guys, I think that was, your zoning predated that.
It did. It definitely. I said, was it 69 or before that? But I know there is a
Mhm.
something about. Think of the master plan. It mentions about us enacting our zoning in 1969
Yeah.
Okay.
because I think Myrna was on the board on the zoning on the board of selectmen when it happened, and that wouldn't have been the 50s.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, for somebody who has a little postage stamp surrounded by wetlands, there you go.
Potentially.
All right, so then the last piece is 48, section 10.
Yeah, that's a big one.
And so 48 section 10, there were a few different changes made. I'm just trying to grab the provisions here. Give me 1 minute, pull that up. And I put some of it into the zoning decision that I just wrote. But I'll just pull it up. Okay, let me share my screen. Then I'll read it to you as well. Sorry, I'm having trouble finding where is on my share option, so give me a minute. Please. Here it is. Okay. Okay, so this is the language here. Usually I quote the language from 48 section 10 in our zoning decision. And I had to revise it because now the standard for granting a variance, as you all recognized in your last decision, is that the board has to determine that strict enforcement of the zoning bylaw would result in a practical difficulty. And basically, making that determination, you have to weigh the benefits to the petition and to the public interest, including the interest in supporting the production of housing, against the detriment to the public health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood. And that's a mandatory piece. So you're required to weigh the benefits to the petitioner and the public interest, including the interest in supporting the production of housing, against the detriment to the public health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood. So if it's an application that involves increasing the amount of housing, so moving from a single family to a 2-family, adding an accessory dwelling unit of some sort, accessory apartment, for instance, something that would allow for the construction of a house on a lot, then that is something you have to take into consideration. And you have to weigh that against the public health, safety, and welfare of the neighborhood. You have the ability, but you're not required to consider all the following pieces. 1, whether the practical difficulty relates to soil conditions, shape, or topography of the land or structures. That's something you're familiar with, right? So you can consider that, but you are not required to. 2, whether strict enforcement would impose a financial hardship on the appellant or the petitioner. Again, something you can weigh, but you're not required to. 3, whether the benefit sought by the appellant or petitioner can be achieved by some other method feasible for the appellant or petitioner to achieve. So is there another way that the benefit that they're looking for, so if, for instance, if they're looking to construct a house, could they construct that house in a way that would comply with the zoning bylaw and not require the variance? You can take that into consideration, you're not required to. And then 4, whether the practical difficulty was self-created. Again, that's something you can take into consideration, but you're not required to. In the decision that you just issued, you actually took into consideration information related to the soil condition, shape, or topography of the land, and whether it would, the benefit that they were seeking could be achieved by some other method feasibly. And you indicated that, based on the soil condition, shape, and topography of the land, you felt that it was a practical difficulty for the developer to be required to comply with the zoning bylaw, because this garage was essentially being constructed in the existing footprint, and which was in the cleared and developed portion of the property. And you could have, I think, also looked at the financial hardship piece of this, since in this particular case of the granting of the variance to allow for the construction of the garage on the existing footprint, if you had required that garage to be located so it complied with the zoning bylaw, you wouldn't be using the existing footprint. And that likely, I suspect, the petitioner would have been able to say to you validly that would have cost them more money to not use the existing footprint. That's not always going to be the case. I mean, it's very possible that actually it would be less expensive to a developer. Let's say they're looking to put an addition on that is rather large, and now it's intruding into a side yard. And they could put a smaller addition on that would comply with the zoning bylaw. Then it's not a financial hardship to the appellant or the petitioner in order to add this larger non-compliant addition. And you could actually indicate, if you're denying that side yard variance, you could potentially take that into consideration and say it would actually not cause a financial hardship to deny this variance. You could also indicate, you could look at the self-created piece. But you need to really be thoughtful about doing any type of denial of a variance at this stage, because that denial, all of these types of considerations are not mandatory. And the mandatory consideration has to actually occur. So in every case, it is really going to be important that you all talk about practical difficulties. That's going to be the new conversation and the new, buzzwords that you're going to be using. And that you're weighing the benefits to the appellant or the petitioners and to the public interest, including supporting the production of housing, against the detriment to the public health, safety, or welfare of the neighborhood. So if abutters don't show up, it's going to be very hard to show that there's a detriment to the neighborhood. If there's no comments from town boards related to public health, safety, or welfare concerns, the fire chief doesn't have a problem, the police chief doesn't have a problem, the board of health doesn't indicate there's a health concern associated with that, that's all going to be really difficult for you to say that there's a challenge here. Because clearly there's a benefit to the petitioner with any application that they're filing for you. And if it involves increasing the production of housing, then that's also going to be something that mandatorily you have to take into consideration.
So, but wouldn't by default living in the town, we know the neighborhood too. We might not live there, but so a great one, for example, the North Dayton case where we had the person 0 Spring Street or Summer Street want to put the
233R.
Yeah. So let's say hypothetically, no butters came out for that.
Right.
But we know the neighborhood well and know how congested it is, and we decided that there is a detriment. How heavily are they going to rely on abutters actually giving comments on that versus what the board feels like?
I mean, you don't provide, you're acting as a board based on the information that's presented to you. You're not necessarily providing that information to yourself, right? I mean, you're familiar with the town, so you can certainly, if somebody comes and presents to you that there's concerns around congestion in the neighborhood, you know for a fact that that's a legitimate concern, and you can understand that. But if no one's presenting that to you, I think it would be, I would not necessarily suggest that you create information that isn't being presented to you. I think that you need to have it presented to you right now. It's very clear to me that the goal here is to try to allow variances to occur more easily.
What about if is this strictly residential only, or if it's mixed use? If it's residential, with business, or they want a business component, and they're telling us they want to build an extension to their home, or they want to build a new home so that they can have a little corner store on that piece of property.
Right, so use variances are still allowed to be prohibited except when it relates to residential uses. That's another aspect of change to this 48 section 10.
So
So the town can prohibit use variances, which you've done, but you cannot prohibit residential use variances. So for your zoning bylaw, if you look at section 5200, and particularly 5222, it says the Board of Appeals shall not grant use variances. And I would say likely what you're gonna see is language that will be added that is going to say except involving residential uses. Because that's the new requirement, that's the exception. So they can apply for use variance, residential based use variances. And you will have to look at that and make that determination on the variance standard that I just discussed with you. But they can't necessarily take a residential use and try to add a commercial use that's prohibited. So mixed use.
and
for
that
instance.
wouldn't go along with the new law, because the whole point is to encourage more housing, not to
Right.
not to encourage more business.
Right. Well, and because I don't think that they're looking to try to take complete power away from towns. You know, it's up to towns to regulate commercial uses and where they want those commercial uses to happen within their community, but they're not happy, you know, they don't want towns to be able to create such the restrictions around residential uses that previously has existed in the Commonwealth.
That's really frustrating, personally.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm not about. It sounds. I don't like what we had a former board member during a discussion with another board say, "Oh, by doing this, we're giving away our power. What's the point?" Like, the point is not about having power, but the point is about, like, I don't care about the power aspect. That sounds like, but if our job is to keep the town as close to how we want it, and they're taking that away, we're not taking it away. They're just really, really tying our hands a lot more. That's gonna be really frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're gonna find it remains to be seen what happens here and how this plays out. And you know, whether you see a change dramatically in applications, or not. So, you know, the interesting thing, so there's been a few other changes to 48 section 10 as well. One of which also is that, the lapse period for variances has been extended. So it used to be a 1-year lapse, or a 6-month lapse that the zoning board could extend for an additional period of time. Sorry, I'm just trying to find where that changes.
Extended.
So it used to be a 6-month lapse, and the zoning board could extend that
It's 2
for
years now, I think.
for another 6 months. I'm sorry, it was a 1-year lapse and the zoning board could extend it for 6 months. It's now been moved to a 2-year
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
period of lapsing. Again, that 2
Wow.
years is told during any time needed to complete getting additional permits to be able to construct it. So any Concom permits, any site plan review that's needed, all of that time is told during the 2 years doesn't start to run until all of those permits are in place, as well as any appeal periods applicable to those permits.
Wow.
So that 2 years doesn't start to run for a variance until then, and then the board can also extend that for up to 2 additional years.
Yep.
So you're not going to see as many applications for extensions of variances because essentially
kidding.
they're gonna have
More
a lot
time.
of,
Yeah.
Wow.
So I
Oh my
have
God.
I have a quick question on that. When you
Sure.
say the 2-year lapse, and that is told from when they get all the required permits, right?
Yeah.
What if you have an individual who has a variance, right? This is for variance or special permit?
Variant.
just variance, it's all just variance.
Okay, so if an individual has a variance, and they decide not to act on that variance, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the 2 years goes by, but they didn't even apply for the other permits. Can they come in at like the 11th hour and try to apply for those permits and now, or actually, wait a minute, let me back up a little bit. So an individual is granted a variance. They have 2 years to act on that. They don't act on that, but they haven't applied for the building permits or anything. So after that 2-year expiration, because they didn't pull the permits, it doesn't expire?
Hold on, because I want
It's-
to make sure that they didn't impose a reasonable, acting reasonably.
Because
It sounds
that
like
happens a lot.
It sounds
Right.
yeah, and
it
it sounds
happens all the time.
Yeah, it does happen a lot.
Yeah, and
And some of the questions that you're asking, I have to be,
Yeah,
I'll be honest with you, I may not know. Like this is the stuff that will get
Right.
litigated.
I think this is the stuff that is gonna come back,
'Cause think
and then
about
we're gonna have to
it
determine.
sounds like they could be given another 2 years.
Exactly.
You're
Let
kidding.
me just see how the language.
I remember we've had this talk before with applicants, and I was just you know now like now like where have you been this whole time?
Well, and that essentially, if that's the way it is, that just tells me that the 2-year expiration really
It's a waste.
has
Yep.
no bearing on any fact until they pull their actual permit. So if they don't pull the permits, then it tells me that it doesn't expire.
Unless it has the reasonable effort to pursue said, like you know, like
Right.
if they show some kind of proof that I pulled the 2 things I need, I pulled 4 of the 5 things I needed. I haven't pulled the 5th one yet.
Yeah.
It's like, well, why? But you know,
But that's showing due diligence. That he's
right?
trying
No,
to
that's what I'm
act
saying.
on
That
that.
at least, that would should be able to stick. But
So there isn't a due diligence provision in here,
Okay.
but I could easily see that being an issue that gets litigated.
Okay.
You know, shall not, it says that, the rights authorized by the variance are not exercised within 2 years after the variance was granted, which shall not include the time required to pursue other entitlements necessary to construct the project authorized by the variance or await the determination of an appeal referred to in section 17. So that's the appeal of the variance. So I think that will be something that will end up getting litigated, you know, is that required time. If they just sat on the variance and did nothing at all to pursue the other entitlements necessary to construct the project, then have they lost the time? Because that would have been required time. I think that's something the board, that is gonna really be a question that will be decided by the courts. And it may be a little case by case specific, to be honest.
yeah,
Because I think that there's gonna be a question of what's reasonable and why was there a delay and what caused the delay, and so those are things you would certainly need to look into. But it's really gonna be, frankly, not the zoning board that looks at this, right? It will be the building inspector, because they're gonna be applying for a building permit, and the building inspector's gonna either determine that variance remains good or doesn't remain good. You will only be involved if they're actually seeking an extension
Right.
after that
Right.
period.
right. That's true. That's true.
All right.
My also biggest thing, Marguerite, and I kind of brushed on this last meeting, is that what I liked about shape soil topography, that's pretty black and white. Those are the things that can be measured. Those are the things that can be analyzed. Those are the things that can be seen on plans. Practical is a big gray area. So like I said, I know knowing this now, we don't have to consider financial. We don't have to consider financial hardship. That's a gray area too. I mean, what's financial hardship to you may not be to somebody else. How do they advise analyzing practical, or do they
So
not?
that's not defined in the law, and that's something that, the planning board's, the memo that you saw from the planning board's attorney noted it as well. It will start being defined by the courts. What is will it result in a practical difficulty? I think that for my advice to you as a board is that you look at those 4 areas that you can consider to determine if there's a practical difficulty. Just because one of them doesn't exist or it does exist doesn't necessarily make it a practical difficulty, but I would definitely focus your conversations and deliberations on those areas after you make that required determination.
What about the financial hardship aspect? That's to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think sometimes you're gonna find that it's actually, to meet the requirements of the zoning bylaw will be less of a financial burden on the developer. So, you know, usually you're gonna be talking about this with regard to, having a lot, creating a lot with insufficient frontage.
Exactly. That's what I'm thinking.
Right, or setback issues, right?
Right. I'm thinking of those who have a piece of property that existed before zoning, and now we're splitting it, and now it's like, well, in order to get my money back, or in order to, like, make even on this project, that's a financial hardship. I mean, that's gonna be tough for us to fight.
Right, but the question is, does strict enforcement impose a financial hardship?
Okay.
I mean,
Right.
if they're still able to get a buildable lot, then you're not imposing a financial hardship per se. They're just looking to have more. There is
Yeah,
still
if
the
it's
ability to
buildable.
receive financial benefit by strict
Right.
enforcement.
If it's
And then
buildable
you
for a
get to
single
number
family
4,
versus a
which is
duplex,
that it
for
was
example.
self-created. You're
Right.
self-creating. If this is a lot with sufficient frontage that they're looking to split into 2 lots, both of which have insufficient
You
frontage.
created that heart at that point.
Right. Now, that being said, this board has allowed that to happen. So
Right.
you also have allowed that to happen under the old standard.
Right.
Under this new standard, it's going to be even harder to justify not allowing something like that to happen when you've allowed it in the past, when there's,
Right.
and you've allowed it in the past where there's been still a pretty legitimate amount of frontage
Definitely. Yeah.
used. So, you know, I think that any member of the public who's thinking about doing that really should try to research what the board has allowed, which is fairly substantial amounts of frontage still, although not necessarily the required amount.
How do you foresee this new law? Which parts of this new law do you see impacting us as a zoning board specifically the most?
So the most is going to be this variance standard.
Yeah.
For sure. There's no question. And the other interesting thing that they did is they deleted the language that existed in 48 section 10 for variances that was very explicit in saying that the zoning board can impose conditions on variances.
Yeah.
Now, it's hard to know what that means. It doesn't necessarily mean that the zoning board can't impose conditions on variances, just because the language was deleted, because they didn't replace it with language saying you can't do
I
that.
saw that too. I wondered why.
But it was deleted, so I think that that's going to be something that gets litigated as well. And then the last piece for me that I find interesting, and this is I did this more of as an exercise of, you know, how does this really matter for you as a zoning board? It's unclear to me. So it's clear that these revisions took effect on July 1st of 2026.
Yep.
But these lapsing requirements, right? Do they apply to only variance applications that came in after July 1st, or do they apply to variances that are in effect essentially haven't lapsed yet, right? So I went back and looked at what the zoning board had done, and you only actually have one viable case that you had granted a variance for, and it was still within that, you know, because if it had been more than a year ago or more than a year before July 1st, then it would have lapsed under the old statute.
Right.
But it was less than a year, and it was a case on Water Street, and it was
Yes.
it was to extend a detached garage.
Correct.
So perhaps the gentleman has already built his detached garage, and this is essentially,
He has.
you know, it's a moot conversation.
Yeah.
The only other possible cases where this could also, the lapsing provisions could have some involvement, and I'm just trying to look at them right now. They involve some 2024 cases, and the reason that they involve those cases is that there was, if you remember, the Permit Extension Act.
Yep.
That used to exist, and that Permit Extension Act actually applied to extend all permits that were granted between January 1st of 2023 and January 1st of 2025, and it gave them an extra 2 years. So these cases that you applied for, that you granted in 2024, case 0424 and 0524, they were issued in July and August of 2024. So if they're extended for another 2 years,
Yeah.
they're still viable right now. And so they would potentially be, some of these cases through the Permit Extension Act may also come back to you.
Yeah.
And that would really be it. Any other cases have already either lapsed or been acted on. And I don't know. I mean, one was a 281 Tremont Street to build an accessory apartment. One was 2120 Water Street to raise and build a larger pre-existing non-conforming
That's
home.
already done pretty much.
If those have been built, then, you know.
That one
yeah.
has. Water Street
Hasn't-
has, yeah. I'm not sure what Tremont has.
Okay.
But I know
Yeah.
Water Street has, or is almost done at this point.
Yeah, Water Street.
Before I turn it over to the board to any questions, what is your thoughts on like how much of our bylaw is going to have to be rewritten or adjusted?
Yeah, so I think that you're going to, like I said, you're gonna need to make some revisions to 2400
Yep.
in a few different spots, particularly 2410, 2420, 2430, 2450, and 2460. That's the abandonment and non-use. That'll have to be revised from 2 years to 4 years.
And do you advise we talk to, set a joint meeting with planning to workshop and then?
I'm sure because their counsel was the one who provided you with that memo that you looked at last time. I'm sure they're already aware of that.
Yeah.
And then I think you're going to need to make some slight revisions to 5200, particularly 5222, which has the power of the zoning board to hear variances, but you don't put the variance standard in your bylaws, so that language
Right.
isn't going to need to change. You're just going to need to address the fact that you can't grant use variances and put that exception in for residential uses. And then the last area will be 5370, which relates to lapse. Perhaps they may want to look at the lapse language and rethink that. But I don't really think there's going to be a lot of changes to the zoning bylaw, and I think that the practical effect of a lot of these revisions is you're going to see less cases.
So we have right now special town meetings scheduled for November 9th. Do we need to try to have this ready to go onto a warrant article for that, or can it wait until June? And I ask that because if we wait until June and somebody comes before us in the meantime, what's our legal obligation if it hasn't been approved yet?
So you don't need a change in your zoning bylaw to be bound by the changes to the statutory
Okay.
provision.
All right.
So you have to
that
follow the
supersedes it.
statutory
Yeah.
provisions. To the extent your zoning bylaw is contrary to it, you can grant,
Okay.
you can make things, you can make things more lenient, but you can't
Okay.
go against the statutory
So
requirements.
basically we have the time to work with, because I think it would be very hard.
Oh, to get it done for November? Oh, impossible, I would say.
Yeah, if your lapsing provisions was 3 years, for instance,
Yep.
you would be bound by that.
Okay.
But you don't have a 3-year lapse.
And then
Uh,
one other question about conditions going forward. Would you advise us to not add conditions? Because I know it doesn't say either way.
I would advise you until you're told by the courts. I would say you can add conditions.
Okay.
Add conditions. Now, the statutory language had always indicated that those conditions have to be based on imposed safeguards, limitations both of time and use. So that's the types of conditions you could have imposed.
Yeah.
But you couldn't impose any type of limitation based upon continued ownership of the land or structures,
Right. That's right.
right? You can only do that with a special permit. And this has no impact on your work with special permits.
I'm surprised. Is
they
that coming? You
They
think?
don't limit building in the same way. They're usually about
Yeah,
usage,
That's true.
right? They're about those town providing, oversight into how property is being used. And that's often, and if you can find a way to get a special permit, either because it's a pre-existing non-conforming structure or use, or because you're applying for a special permit through the provisions of your bylaw, it's a lot easier, it's a much better, likely approved outcome, likelihood of approval for the petitioner if you're talking about a special permit rather than a variance,
Right.
has generally been the way that I think most petitioners have viewed their request before a zoning board. In this case, that may change now because of this change to the standard of the variance.
Yeah. Sue, do you have any questions?
No, I just, as far as, if somebody, they're under the 2-year, time frame, and let's say they sell the land. Now,
Good question.
do they get the remainder of that 2 years and then possibly ask for the 2 more year extension that you said that they could ask for, that the new owners, or is that null and void at that point, or how does that work?
Good question.
Yeah, so the transfer of land doesn't impact a variance. So yes, you would continue to have that. The new owner would have the rights granted by the variance available to them.
So they could follow out the rest of the 2 years and then ask for the 2 years more.
Yes.
Right, okay.
As long as they apply for that extension of an additional 2-year period before the first 2 years expires, they can ask for an additional 2-year period from you, and that would have to go to you.
Okay, and is that pretty much an already answer of yes with the way these laws are going now, or no, not definitely?
There's really no clear, standard. It is discretionary with the board to grant an additional 2-year period. So there isn't a clear standard for why you would or wouldn't.
Okay.
It does say that the permit granting authority, in its discretion and upon written application of the grantee, may extend the time to exercise the variance rights for a period not to exceed 2 years. That application for the extension was filed prior to the expiration of the initial 2 years, and if you don't act within 30 days of the application, then and the 2-year period expires, they can only reestablish it through a new hearing and a new variance.
Okay.
So you also may find that you're going to have, any of those cases that you've had where somebody's coming back to reestablish a variance that they lost. You may have fewer of those too.
Okay.
Elise, you have any questions?
Unfortunately, I missed most of this conversation, so I'm just catching up right now.
Okay.
But is it? Do the towns do we have any recourse if we don't agree with these new laws? Can the state tell towns what they can do? I guess
They can make revisions to 40A as they have. I mean, you can talk to your state legislators, but this was originally proposed in the House from the House in their budget appropriation bill, and then it was adopted by the governor. I can tell you that at there were very few people who voted against it in the state legislation. Trying to see if I can pull it up quickly. I want to say there was 1 state senator and maybe like 5 or 6 people in the House.
I will say this is why I talk with my dad about this. Like, how much does does the governor's decisions actually impact a citizen versus you're a state rep or house rep. How much electing to them does that really matter to you? This is exact cases where it absolutely does.
Yeah.
So that's why when you vote, when you go to the elections, who's up for it? Oh, okay, I'll fill in so and so. They've been there forever. It's like, do you know what they're standing for? Is this someone that you? Well, obviously we're one town. If 50 other towns want it one way, we don't want it one way. Well, that doesn't really matter. But I mean, that's really the only way that for us to change these things is to not vote for people in power who are going to make those decisions, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, I'm trying to see if you can search it yourself to see who voted for it. It was House Bill 5555, and then it was, the statutory provision is, that the governor signed is, chapter 137 of the Acts of 2026. I just don't have that piece pulled up right now, I don't think.
Well, I don't have any questions right now. I'm just kind of catching up to the conversation.
Yeah.
And thank you, though. It's very great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Sue, I mean, it's not Sue. Elise, definitely go back when the meeting is posted online and check out the first half of it.
Oh, 100%.
John, do you have anything else?
No, I've asked my questions as we've gone along. Thank you.
Carrie, you got anything else?
I'm good.
How does planning board feel?
I think they're still digesting it right now.
Yeah.
Really is what they're
As
doing.
we are.
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Marguerite.
Yay.
You're
A
welcome.
lot of information.
Yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see how this gets put into play, and as we start to have more legal entities digested and work with it, you're gonna get additional guidance, I'm sure, about it.
Yeah, definitely.
But I do see it as looking to try to find ways to allow for the creation of housing. So I think that particularly when you're talking about variances that would address the creation of housing, I would advise you to really be very careful about thinking about any denials and to have a lot of reasons to support that denial if
Right.
you're going to
Like,
do that.
yeah, I guess your average looking to build a garage or something like that, or create on the same footprint, kind of stuff like that. That's gonna be as it always has been. It's more the new houses and I inherited a piece of property that I, didn't think that I had, and now
There's a lot that we haven't been able to do anything with.
Exactly.
So now I will.
Those postage stamps. Yeah.
were there any laws changed regarding wetlands and buffering? Because that's where
I
I'm
don't
Think so.
know for sure. There were.
because
This wasn't the only statute that was impacted by these revisions.
the only reason why I'm asking that is because that's one of our saving graces in town is that we have a lot of a lot on Tremont, a lot on Maple. There's a lot of spots where houses not been developed yet. Well, it's all wetlands. It's got to be only a matter of time before they find some ways around that, right? I don't know.
I mean, I think sometimes with the wetlands piece, you're getting into concerns around health and safety a little bit
Right, so
more.
you can argue that aspect of it.
Right, then you have DEP, that's also, they could appeal, for a superseding order of conditions to DEP, so.
Right,
Right.
that's right.
That's always, even in 40B, for 40B, I mean, the local bylaw might be overturned, but there are certain minimum requirements that 40B recognizes they need to.
That's what I was wondering with 40Bs that get denied or something where it's like, or not for that got denied. Future 40Bs coming before us, I can see if there are new acts that change. Oh, now you don't have to be 20 feet away. You can be 10. You can be 10 feet away for something that would come back and potentially be an issue for us. That well, if old law was in place, we would have to deny it. But now the buffering, has changed, and now it's within our power to approve it. I don't know.
Also, the septic systems will affect how people build too. They're very expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And that could be, something related to the soil shape or topography. That's a consideration that would take that into account, as well as the financial hardship, and could justify why you're putting a house in a certain spot on a lot. And not necessarily why you would need to have a lot with insufficient frontage per se.
All right. Just
For
one.
the wetland.
John just notified he might have to get out of here on the sooner side, so I just want to go forward in case any votes have to be made. Because if he leaves, oh no, we have 4 now. So if God forbid he does leave,
Yeah.
we have enough
Yeah, and
members.
if it's
So
the minutes, I wasn't here at the last meeting, so.
okay, great. All right, Marguerite. I guess we'll just
Yeah.
well, you know, obviously we'll let you know if we need you.
Keep plugging along.
Yeah, if we need you
Okay.
for next meeting,
Well,
but
thank you as always.
No problem,
and,
thank you.
Thank you, Marguerite.
Yes, we'll see how this all plays out.
yep, I'll give you a call after the meeting.
Sounds good. Take care.
All right, you got it. All right, public input. No one's here. No one's on Zoom.
No.
Besides our 2 members.
Alright.
Approval of the minutes. I'll make the motion. Oh, did everyone have a chance to review them?
What did you say, Zach? I couldn't hear you.
Have you
Did you have a chance to review the
Anyone
minutes?
have- No, I have not.
Elise, did you?
I don't think she heard you.
Elise? Did you hear me?
Hello?
Oh, there you are.
So-
Did you have a chance to review the minutes yet?
I looked at them.
Okay. That being said, I'll make the motion that we approve the minutes for July 28th.
I second that.
Any discussion? All those in favor?
Roll call.
Aye, Zachary Karen.
Hi, Susan Pritchard.
Eileen Svensson.
That's it.
Okay.
Are you gonna abstain?
You're abstaining from voting?
I wasn't here.
Oh, so you can't vote yet. But yeah. All right. Is it anything else? I'll make the motion to adjourn.
I'll second that.
I was like, really? I'm getting abstaining from vote. I have to close this meeting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Yeah. Hi,
Aye.
Susan Pritchard.
Eileen Svensson.
Hi, Jonathan Gale.
Aye, Zachary Karen.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.